Yeah, Nickelodeon, the rise and the fall. I don't really know if there is any fall at all. Well, there is now, but I'm kind of biased because I don't watch it anymore. I would say, I stopped watching Nickelodeon in like 2013. So I'm a 2000s baby. So I watched it through like seventh, eighth grade, and then we got like Hulu, and then I started watching like South Park, Family Guy, all that shebang, all that jazz. So yeah, let's see the rise and fall of Nickelodeon.
Analyzing a creative network like this, it's hard to do. So just realize, this is not an opinion piece, but my own opinions do influence the video more than usual. I should tell you right away that I used to be one of the biggest Nickelodeon fans that you'll ever see. I was born in 1991, so I'd say
Every
something like
Saturday
from
morning, I was in front of the
1994 through
TV
2004, I
with either
watched
Nickelodeon
everything
on
that
or
they had to
Nicktoons
offer.
on.
Double Dare, Rugrats, all that. Are You Afraid of the Dark? I used to get so scared watching that. If you had asked me to list my top 10 favorite shows, at least 8 of those would have come from Nickelodeon. I had
That's a
so
good
much
question. Out of all of my favorite shows, ooh, are any Nickelodeon? SpongeBob's probably gonna make it. SpongeBob's probably gonna be a top tenner. I'm trying to. I don't think there's any other ones from Nickelodeon. Well, none that I can think of, at least. The other ones include either Cartoon Network. No, the other ones include. If we're just talking about cartoons, the other ones are gonna probably be from Cartoon Network. Is cartoon? I'm sorry,
faith
but
in that
Cartoon
network
Network's
that I
lineup
would
was
actually sit there
absolutely
and watch
stacked.
shows that I didn't even like because I
Is that like
figured
a
they
6-year-old
must
boy
be
with
good if they're
earrings?
on Nickelodeon. Do you remember that show, The Brothers Garcia? I used to hate when that came on, but for some reason, 9-year-old
I've seen this guy before. Where have I seen this guy before? I'm gonna have to look it up
me would never
later.
miss an episode. Nickelodeons go way back to the early 1900s. Not the network, but there were these cheap little affordable theaters, usually in urban areas, that would show
Show going
movies.
on
The
all the
word
time for
Nickelodeon is a
five
combination of the
cents.
word nickel, which is how much they would charge for admission, and Odeon, which is the Greek word for theater. They were cheaper than
Must
going
be
out to a
nice.
play and really just one of the cheapest forms of entertainment at the time.
I
I
wish
know
I
we're
could watch
talking about
Spider
the early
Man.
1900s here,
What is it, the
but
new one?
still, a
Far
Nick
From Home? Is Far From Home the new one? Or No Way Home? I wish I could watch Spider Man No Way Home for 5 cents.
Nickel was not
Just
a
walk
bad
up,
price for a night of
throw it down.
entertainment.
Yeah,
In the
I'd like to
1910s,
see
there were
Spider
thousands of
Man
them across the United
No
States,
Way
and people
Home.
were
Be like,
starting
all
to
right,
see
go
the
inside.
potential of the industry. The movies and the theaters started getting bigger and better and more expensive. Eventually, these Nickelodeons were phased out, but the name lives on. Let's skip ahead 60 or 70 years to April 1st, 1979, when Warner launched a new television channel called Nickelodeon as the first network for kids. And I realize the name doesn't seem to have any connection until you see their original theme.
Introducing Nickelodeon.
I wonder what their
Children's
first show
programming
was.
that's fit for children.
There was this projector and a mime with this old-timey music. Honestly, I don't get it.
What was
Maybe
that,
things were
Joaquin
different back
Phoenix?
then, but I would never expect this early 1900s theme to be appealing to children. It just doesn't seem fitting. Plus, considering they didn't show old movies or shows, it just doesn't fit. Maybe they got that same impression, because after a couple of years, they dropped it and brought in some more color. But through all of this, nothing was really happening. They did have a hit show called You Can't Do That on Television, sort of a sketch comedy thing. It's actually responsible for introducing the green slime to the network. But other than that, things were pretty weak, and people weren't really watching Nickelodeon. Now, you wouldn't know it from watching the networks, but Nickelodeon has been closely tied to MTV. In fact, in 1984, MTV and Nickelodeon were brought together into a division called MTV Networks. On January 1st, 1985, VH1 was created and added to that division. 9 months later, all three of them were sold to Viacom. It was a deal valued over $600 million and also included half of Showtime. They already own the other half. I want to express how insignificant Nickelodeon was to this deal. When CNN reported on it, their headline was Viacom buys MTV, no mention of Nickelodeon. They only bring it up once, halfway through the article, when they finally say that they also
While MTV Networks also produces Nickelodeon, a children's cable channel, and VH1, a video music channel aimed at. That's a really long sentence. I'm not gonna finish that out, but yeah. Wow. You couldn't have even put it in like a even like a smaller font. At least like put the name up or something.
produce Nickelodeon, but the real
I'd be
prize
pissed if
here
I was
is
the CEO
MTV.
of
At that time,
Nickelodeon.
of all the cable networks, Nickelodeon was in last place. I think it's safe to say that they were insignificant, but Viacom must have seen potential because they invested pretty heavily in it and amazingly were able to turn it around. As far as basic cable network rankings, Nickelodeon went from last place in 1985 to first place by 1995. Let's take a look at how
You're very special, kid.
Way to go,
Quest to
Viacom.
take you back to
they did it. For one, they looked at some of the successful aspects of MTV and applied them to Nickelodeon, mainly the graphics.
quite simple,
MTV
just,
used to have all these
create
crazy,
SpongeBob.
colorful animations and graphics.
So easy.
It sent a cool, modern vibe, and they were kind of known for it. So they figured this would be perfect for our kids' network. For the second half of the 1980s, they introduced
There we go. Here's the
everything that
orange.
I associate with the network. I'm talking
Here's
all
the
these wild
orange.
animations with the color orange everywhere, the iconic Splat logo, and more importantly, they also introduced Nick at Night,
Nick
which
at
was
Night.
just a bunch of old sitcoms that
What shows did you guys watch on Nick at Night? Like, for me, there was only one. And it was George Lopez. Dun, dun. Oh, I can't even remember how the theme song went. Hold on. Dude. Oh, man. I know this. I know the lyrics. I can't think of the melody. Forget it. But yeah, it was basically just George Lopez. Oh, no. My Wife and Kids as well. I watched My Wife and Kids and George Lopez on Nick at Night. And then when it was morning time, I don't think that's right. I want to say they had That 70s Show on in the morning, but I might be thinking of a different channel.
they would air later in the day when all the kids were asleep. Of all their changes in the network, I would say that the most important one came in 1991 when they introduced Nicktoons. You probably know that it's more expensive to produce cartoons as opposed to live action shows, but Viacom was finally able to invest, and plus it's kind of strange having a network for kids without cartoons, isn't it? So I imagine that they saw this as being almost essential. In August of that year, they introduced their first
Ren
three
and
cartoons.
Stimpy.
They were
The
Ren and
weirdest
Stimpy,
show you will ever
Rugrats,
watch. Sorry,
and
the
Doug.
weirdest
I'd say
cartoon
that's
show
a pretty
you'll watch.
incredible
What
start.
was
Ren
it?
and
Doug,
Stimpy,
Rugrats, and okay.
and Doug. I'd say that's a pretty incredible start. All three are thought to be classics today, and really, I would consider just about any cartoon they made in the 90s to be a classic. We have
I never
Rocko's
watched
Modern
Doug.
Life. Real.
I've seen one episode of Doug, and that was thanks to Berlizzi. Berlizzi did like some reaction to a Halloween special or something like that. It was really good. I wish I would have watched more Doug. I used to see his books in the library, and I'd be like, oh, fuck that guy. So then I'd just walk away. I'd never touch Doug. Well, that sounds a little weird. I didn't mean it like that. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is, when I was a kid, I wish I would have watched more Doug.
Monsters,
Sorry.
Hey Arnold,
There's another
Kablam,
one.
The Angry Beavers,
Hey Arnold.
Cat Dog, The Wild
What a
Thornberries,
show.
Rocket Power.
I used
even
to hate
a few
them
of their
too.
later shows too, Invader Zim, The Fairly
Then I waited
Odd
till I was like
Parents, Jimmy
14,
Neutron,
15
and it wasn't all
to watch the
Nicktoons.
show,
What about all
and it was
this
really
live
good.
action stuff? In 1990,
Get
they
rid of
opened
all the live
Nickelodeon
action stuff.
Studios, where they filmed all
Except
sorts
for-
of live action shows. Notably, you have Clarissa
I keep
Explains It
interchanging
all that,
Cartoon
Kenan
Network
and
and
Kel,
Nickelodeon.
Not to mention all the wacky game shows like Double Dare and Figure It Out.
Oh, they
In
had Brain. Oh man, there was one Brain game Nickelodeon had. Oh, I can't remember the name. I want to say it was called like Brain Game or something like that. And yeah, basically it was just like a cheaper version of what's the show? Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
1994, Viacom
I used to watch it
spent
every
$8
day before
billion
football practice.
to buy the majority stake
And every
of the
time-
film studio
every time it would
Paramount
come on, I'd be like,
Pictures.
"Oh,
they started
shit.
putting that synergy
That means
to
there's
work
only an
when they
hour
teamed
left, and then
up
I
to
gotta go to
create
football
Nickelodeon
practice.
movies. Their first release was Harriet the Spy in 1996, followed by Good Burger the following year, the Rugrats
That was
movie
such a
the year
horrible
after that.
movie. Good
Again,
Burger is so
all
bad.
classics in
I
my
don't care what
opinion.
anyone says.
Now,
That movie is so
I know
bad.
everyone wants to hear about what happened to Nickelodeon. What went wrong, and why are they so bad now? The idea on my website says Nickelodeon, parentheses,
When they
rise and
created
fall,
Loud
but I
House,
have to be
that's
honest,
when-
I don't
that's when
have
everything hit the
perfect
fan.
answers as to why they've fallen, nor am I completely convinced of this fall. So instead of trying to make these arguments, I'd prefer to just talk about what's been going on. Nickelodeon is still owned by Viacom, which at this point I'm sure you realize they have a lot more going on, and since they don't separately report figures for Nickelodeon, it makes it difficult to see how the network's been doing. However, they have been reporting how many subscribers they have from from 1993 all the way to 2016.
What's their
Looking
peak?
at this graph, you may be
2010?
quick to draw conclusions.
Shocker.
And say right about 2010, Nickelodeon went bad and they've been declining ever since. I would address that by saying Netflix and YouTube have really grown over that time, especially with kids, and have caused people to cancel their entire cable package. There's this whole cord-cutting movement, and you can expect to see a similar graph for most cable channels.
I don't get
with
why
the
they don't
peak
just
being
do a
right around
Nickelodeon Plus.
2010. And as recent as 2015, their
Disney
SEC
Plus has absolutely
reports claim
skyrocketed
that
in the
they've held on
past
to that number
3-4
one basic cable
years.
spot every year
Nickelodeon
since
Plus. I'd buy Nickelodeon
1995.
Plus. I'm telling you, if they charge $20 a month for Nickelodeon Plus, I'd buy Nickelodeon Plus. Like, I wouldn't even think about it twice. I'd be like, dude, where do I sign? Here's the credit card. Right here. Go ahead. Where's my shows?
So yes, Nickelodeon is declining in this aspect, but I wouldn't really say it's their fault. Another argument you can make is, what about Nickelodeon Studios? You know, after every show, they would always
Same
have
with
that shot
Cartoon
of it
Plus.
with the green fountain in frame.
No,
I always
scratch
wanted to
that.
go there.
I'd pay
And now
20
I'm sad to
for
say
Cartoon Plus. I'd pay 20 for Cartoon Plus. I'd pay maybe like at most 15 for Nickelodeon Plus. Scratch that. I'd pay 10. Because, yeah, Cartoon Network was just stacked.
That I never will, because they shut it down in 2005.
For the
which
Blue
I know
Man
sounds
Group.
like a bad sign, but they shut it down because the network shifted away from those game shows and the live-action stuff that required
Lori
a studio audience. I'd say the fact that this place is gone means that Nickelodeon is now different, but not necessarily worse. It all starts to get really subjective. A big argument going around is Nickelodeon has gotten lazy. SpongeBob premiered in 1999, evidently on my birthday. It was a big hit, and they've since become
Wow.
far too reliant
You
on
were
it.
born on the day
Creativity is
SpongeBob
gone,
was
and they're
made?
spending
That's
all their
awesome.
efforts on what they know already works, and are too reluctant to take any chances on something new. I mean, just looking at the Nickelodeon schedule, about half of their
SpongeBob SquarePant. Who is SpongeBob SquarePant?
time slots
I was
are
gonna make a
occupied
dog
by
joke there.
SpongeBob. I'm not
No,
going to
pant,
dispute
but
this one too much, because I
I
think
couldn't
there's
think
some
of
truth
anything.
to it, but I will point out that
Paw
there's been some
Patrol.
pretty
Next to
respected shows to
SpongeBob,
premiere
that's
since
disgusting.
1999. We have Invader Zim and the Fairly OddParents in 2001, Jimmy Neutron in 2002, Drake and Josh in 2004, Zoe 101 and Avatar The
Wow.
Last Airbender in 2005.
Look at all these hit
iCarly in
shows.
2007. It's not a complete
Looking
list,
at
but I
these,
think you get
scratch
the
that. I'd
idea.
pay
Still, over
15.
time, it does look like this approach has hindered their creativity, or at the very least, their variety. But there are a lot of people watching SpongeBob, so I'm not so sure the schedule has hurt them financially. I think most would agree that the Nicktoons aren't what they used to be. They certainly
loved
don't
Fanboy
focus
and
on them
Chum
like they
Chum.
used to. Same goes for the game shows. A lot of the network isn't what it used to be, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's doing bad. See, this is where things get
Jean Gino.
difficult. I look at this list of Nickelodeon shows, and in my opinion, they start to get bad right around 2004. Drake and Josh I always liked, and that's probably the last one.
Wow.
And I look at the more
Zoe?
recent stuff, and
Are
I
you
don't even know what
shitting
it
me?
is. The Thundermans, Game Shakers, Sanjay and Craig. I've lost touch with Nickelodeon, and that raises a question that maybe we should all ask
Zoe 101 was made in
ourselves. Did the
2005.
shows really get lazy and worse over the years?
Mighty
Or
Bee
have
was awesome,
just
too. I
seen them
loved it.
differently as I've gotten older? I don't have an answer to it, but it sounds really ignorant to me to say as soon as I became a teenager, the Nickelodeon shows got really bad. I'll never say anything
Well,
bad
call
about
me
the
ignorant
Rugrats
then.
or Hey Arnold.
Call me
I still
ignorant
think they're
then.
good shows, but I no longer think they're the best shows that humans can ever hope to create. And I've revisited some of those old episodes of All That recently. Not quite as great as I remember. And I thought this was worth mentioning. Those three original Nicktoons, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, the shows as they premiered and grew big, all had early endings. For Ren and Stimpy, the original creator was fired. I recommend this video by LS Mark if you want to hear more about that. For the Rugrats, the original writers had disagreements and a lot of them left early on. Saber Spark made a good video about that. For Doug, Nickelodeon let it slip away and it was bought by Disney so they could play it as part of their ABC Saturday morning cartoons. I haven't come across a great video about that, but all three of these iconic.
What the hell is a hot cheese float? What are we doing here? A hot cheese float? How would you even make one of these? I need to watch the show and see how a hot cheese float is made.
Original Nicktoons went through these major changes behind the scenes that affected the shows after just a few seasons. So, in support of their potential decline, the three shows that helped build that lovable kids network of the 90s, arguably more than any other, all had major issues, and that wasn't ideal for the network.
I'm not
But they
touching a
obviously made
hot
it through
cheese
it.
float.
For many kids around the
No
world,
thanks.
including me,
Vanilla ice cream,
Nickelodeon
that's
was once
it.
something magical. Sure, maybe they've gotten lazy and lost touch with their
What happened to
audience.
Mr.
But
Man's
I'd argue
nose?
that with YouTube and all the other on-demand platforms, video games, we now live in a time where it's impossible to capture that same magic through a TV network. Disney does seem to be able to do it, but look how much it takes. I know, I'm all over the place here, so let me summarize. The subscription numbers are down, the famous Nickelodeon studios are closed forever, and the shows just aren't what they used to be. But I think that creates a narrative that sounds much worse than it actually is. Maybe they're different, maybe we're different. Let's face it, it's probably a combination of both. Let me know in the comments, what do you think happened to Nickelodeon? I asked the question, but I don't know who can really answer.
I'm telling you, when the Loud House, and yeah, he had a good point with saying the Thundermans, when those shows were made, it hit a decline. And yeah, he even said it. I'd be ignorant to say that just because I grew up, that all the shows started getting bad. So be it. That just even reflects more of my stubbornness and my ignorance. But hey, that's just what I believe.